welcome to our first live Q&A as Mobius, the long road to privacy. I think just to quickly welcome everyone that's attending, we've already had a few questions around some technical aspects. So please feel free to use the chat functionality in the screens. Feel free to use the Q&A section to post any of your questions that you'd like us to answer. So how we're going to structure this morning is quite informal. We'd like to keep it fresh and get you guys to interact with us. So we'll be taking your questions and really try and answer everything. I think we've set up the time, and obviously you're welcome to drop off if you need to, or if you have any other commitments. We'll make this recording available to you, and we will also make any slides or presentation decks or links that we share available with you as well. So just by way of welcoming my co-host, Candice Jackson, she heads up our National Privacy Service line from a Mobius consulting perspective, and we are going to be your in-flight entertainment for the morning.
Morning, everyone.
All right. Okay, so maybe just one or two quick things as well. Remember to follow the Mobius Consulting page on LinkedIn, where we post very relevant industry information, service information, and just some general tips and comments as well. All right. Okay, so I think let's get started. Let's see, Candice, if you maybe want to kick off with one or two of the pre-submitted questions, then I'll start having a look at the Q&A.
No, thanks, Roelien. So morning, everybody. And like Roelien said, we are going to keep this quite informal. So post as much questions, but some of the questions that have come through, what we've done is we've grouped some of them just to make sure that we can answer as much as possible, as much as keep as the similar themes to go through some of the questions. So one of the questions that we got, and just a reminder, is just that, we are looking at it from a privacy perspective, so not just POPIA, MAU, or GDPR from the UK perspective and EU side of things. So when we talk about privacy, we'll obviously just touch on those things. So someone asked if there's a one-man organization, but they are processing personal information, and there is personal information taking place. How do they actually operate in an environment where privacy is required? Do they have to register as a DPO or an information officer or an information protection officer, whichever term you use? So that was the one question. The other question was also around SMEs who outsource a lot of information. They outsource a lot of their functions. They don't have big budgets. How do they go about implementing privacy, and what does their privacy journey look like? And to answer both of those questions, you've really got to look at how much information is being processed. Now you'll be like, okay, well, guys, how do I even start with that? I don't know where to start. And there's a lot of free available sources as well as recognized reliable sources. So it's not just that we're sending you for free stuff, but if you had to look at, the ICO within the EU, the Information Commissioner's Office, where there's a lot of free available assessments and information, as well as from an MAU perspective, and even in South Africa as well, there's a lot of things out there where you can already assess what is my extent of processing personal information, and it gives you that, what are the immediate things I need to do. Also, reaching out to your local data protection authorities will guide you in terms of, when do I need to register? Do I actually need to register? Or do I just need to have these certain things in place? They are there to be your guiding force, to help you, to take you through this journey as well. And I know sometimes you'll feel like, oh, but am I actually going to get through to them? That's their reason. That's what they're there to do. I know registering of DPOs and IPOs is a big step. And through that application process, they'll also tell you, okay, through the extent of you processing personal information, whether you need to be registered, etc. Now, I know some people are more along their journeys than others, especially when we're talking country-specific journeys. But giving those things consideration, extent of processing, looking at reliable free sources that are already out there, which not only includes assessments, but also guiding you through the implementation journey, notices, policies that you need to have in place, and then reaching out to those data protection authorities to really help you in terms of guiding you when you need to, when you don't need to. And then also, you know, we get information, and when we know more, we put it out there as public knowledge. It's not something you have to be like, oh, I need to sign up for this. We really are trying to communicate as much as possible when we hear something, that you guys get it firsthand, that it's on our LinkedIn pages, that it's on our website, as really just be news. Because as we move along this privacy journey, I think things are going to change. And I think we're going to get more and more examples of, okay, am I an exception to the rule, or is this a norm, or how do I need to go about that? And as we get it, we'll share it with you. Roelien, I'm not sure if there's anything you'd like to add on that one.
Yeah, you did on the head. Thank you, Candice. And I think, guys, also forums like this, where you're invited to, you're welcome to ask your questions anonymously as well. When you do put your question in your Q&A section, you can tick the anonymous button, and really just use the opportunity to ask and you know, gain a bit of assurance in terms of what you're doing. I know there's also the International Association of Privacy Professionals, who, you know, have members across the world, and I think some of the attendees today also are members of that association. They hold frequent, well, these days, webinars around, you know, what are the hot topics from a privacy perspective, what are some of the issues that some organizations are facing. And what we'll do just at the end of this session is we've had a webinar previously where we discussed the common pitfalls of privacy compliance projects or programs. So we'll just share like a summary of some do's and don'ts if you are starting your journey, or whether you are in the middle of it or done. Okay. All right. Okay, I see we just have a question that popped in. Maybe before we answer that, I think a very interesting question that we received is, when we are dealing with data subject right requests, how is the best way to approach it, have a process in place, so that when we receive these requests, we are able to manage it. So what we normally do is we try and separate the different kinds of data subject requests. And oftentimes, you know, there would be one role or function that would oversee this or coordinate it for a company. And those requests or those data subject rights are normally the right to access information, then the right to correct, delete, move it normally, and then also direct marketing that I'd like to kind of bucket in data subject rights also. So the best and the most practical way to approach this is to really just consider how your organization operates, the kind of data subjects you have, which would normally be your customers or consumers if you are directly offering goods and services, your employees, any vendors or third parties that you deal with. And yeah, so those are normally the three big types of data subjects. Then don't over-engineer this. Sit down with relevant teams across your organization. So normally a compliance, legal, IT, risk teams should be involved in these processes, and really consider, you know, if we get an access request from a customer, that's maybe their data is on a legacy system, it may be archived 20 years ago in a remote location. How are we practically going to manage this request? And is it even possible for us to go back and go get all of that information? And the reason I'm stopping at this point is, although general privacy legislation, and I know from a South African perspective as well, give the right for us to be able to access our information, there's also certain operational considerations that organizations can use to actually not provide that access. It may be that those archived folders or files are not able to be retrieved. It could be that legacy systems have actually been decommissioned. So there's normally a reason, you know, attached to not being able to give access as well. And sometimes it's really straightforward and you can give the access. All right. So I think where we're going with this is that it needs to be approached on a case-by-case basis. Yes, you can procure a standard off-the-shelf template to deal with data subject rights, but when you get these in your organization, you're going to have to sit down and see how they apply. The same goes for deleting and moving information. If we're going to have to delete records in a system and it creates system failures or operational issues, we actually have a reasonable ground to go back and say, well, we're not able at this stage to provide you or to manage your request. However, this is how we are ensuring that your data is secure, or we will de-identify it or anonymize it. So to give them the actual remedial controls if we can't manage their right request. Okay. And the last one is direct marketing. I know this is quite a hot topic, and a lot of direct marketing teams are, wondering what should they be doing and not. And I think just the crux of it is go with the more stringent approach, not to hinder any of your operations, but go with a specific opt-in approach and get people to actually want to subscribe to your newsletters and your communication and your SMSs, and then deal with them, at a service level where possible. A lot of companies are implementing, big direct marketing kind of solutions. Depending on the size of your organization, that may not be necessary. So again, consider size and where you are from an operations perspective. I think very briefly I touched on direct marketing. So if there are any other direct marketing questions, let's get to those as well if you guys post them. All right. I see Natalie posted a question. So in terms of data subject rights, what information or records do we have to provide? Does this include special personal information, e.g. health info, etc.? So let's look at this from a South African context. If we look at the Promotion of Access to Information Act, which is almost like the sister or the brother to POPIA, which gives the public or us as members of the public a way to request access to our information, there's a very structured process that is followed and that you need to follow to actually submit your access request. And it's normally facilitated by something that non-exempt entities.
Okay, cool. Sorry about that, guys. Sorry about the technical glitch there. Roelien, are you back, or would you like me to continue?
I'm back. Sorry about that, guys. Working from home. I think all of us have some work from home stories. So I think just to answer Natalie's question, when you are completing that PI manual for specific organizations, when you want to request your information, you can specify what you want to have access to. I think it's very important to specify because organizations will focus on that in terms of the level of effort and how far back they need to go from a system perspective. Okay.
Cool. Just looking at some of the other questions as we spoke about DPOs and, just registering an IPO and information officer. We've got a question that, who can be a DPO in an organization, and, what do best practices say about this? And I think you'll get weird and wonderful answers, and you'll get a lot of finger pointing because, it is a big role. No one really wants to take responsibility, but all the legislations or regulations that we look at really does look at the, this person having a role within the organization where they can be independent in terms of their general role that they may perform. So, we've seen anything from a compliance role to a risk role, which is the better suited roles because you've got oversight over the organization, etc. A lot of the times we do see the information security, the IT function. We always go with that one with a lot of caution. And the reason why we do it is just because of when we talk about personal information or personal data or just data, you're talking about both electronic as well as hard copies. And as soon as you just go with the IT lens or you bring an IT focus onto it, you sometimes may forget, where all your hard copy information resides as well. And that's always important. So I think, that role can be within a function within the organizations that oversees operations, that has a good understanding of the business, but would also be able to, you know, to put things in place and to guide the organization to say, okay, guys, what you're doing here is wrong or may not be compliant. Let me help you to do it in that way. So they need to have a position within the company where they can implement privacy, where they can monitor privacy. And that's what we look at. They don't say, put it in this function or put it in that function, but put it in a function that has enough oversight and can be subjective to what needs to happen from a privacy perspective, but then also always consider the, you know, the deputy roles or the champion roles that you really need to implement privacy, because as much as you're going to register somebody, it's not a one-man job to implement privacy within the organization. Right, just checking, no real other questions about DPOs. One of the other things that we're just going to touch on is a little bit on children's information. And you know, it's always a hot topic, and I think even more recently, schools, universities, aftercares, people that provide educational training after school, you know, they also starting to ask a lot of questions. How much information can I collect? You know, what consent do I need when I'm collecting that information? A lot of people are taking pictures and, you know, they want to share it and things like that. How do they go about it? And it's all about, you know, here when you're dealing with children's information, it's a whole new ball game. It's not just personal information. It's special personal information. It's got the way you need to protect it, the way you need to handle it, but the way you need to actually get consent before you even start collecting that information is very different. And you know, you've got to be quite explicit in that consent. So if you want to take a picture while your child is learning, or I mean, while the child is learning, and you know, you want to share it and things like that, you need that parental consent before you actually put it out there. If you're going to be doing extra programs, or you know, you're going to be using a third party to communicate with parents and things like that, you need to notify them. So because it's dealing with minor information, you really have to make sure that you have the right processes in place. Again, how long information can be collected from children's personal information perspective. Again, you've got to rely on the regulations and the legislations within the country specific that relate to that type of processing. POPIA, the Data Protection Act, GDPR, none of them tell you keep information for this long. They will all refer to you to the actual acting legislation or regulation within that country. So that's always the key just to look out for, because those are your guiding principles in terms of how long you keep certain information. And that's where it will guide you on the children's information. But it really is just touching on, you know, here we need to take extra care. We need to put extra security safeguards, and we really need to be open about what we do. I think nursery schools and cameras and all of these things, you know, it's all new. It's all the direction that we're moving in. But as you do these things, you've got to make sure that you've got those right controls in place, starting with that explicit consent from the beginning. Okay.
All right, so I think just leading on from that, we've got a nice question around what is the role or responsibility of enterprise software development companies when it comes to privacy, and you know, when they develop solutions. And I think we've had one or two questions around cloud as well. So I think on the one hand, the cloud service providers or the companies developing software really have a responsibility to develop their software with privacy in mind. Now, normally when we say that, there's a term called privacy by design. So from the initial stages of developing the solution to setting up any user interfaces and even deployment and management, to really consider the life cycle of privacy in that development or solution. When it comes to, you know, companies actually using those services and software, you know, the companies are still responsible to configure any specific security controls that they want to or need to make sure is in place. Yes, the service providers can guide, but there's still a responsibility on the company to implement the relevant controls and to work with the cloud software providers to make sure that those settings are in fact appropriate. Okay, I think there's a lot of you know, information around what are the minimum kind of practices. So, you know, maintaining transparency when you're using cloud services, making sure your notifications are up to date, and when you're onboarding clients or employees to communicate, maintaining security from an internal perspective, doing regular tests on your networks and your software providers, you know, those kind of elements. Okay. And then, yeah, I think especially in smaller organizations, really build the relationships with those development houses or those service providers to get guidance from them in terms of what are the minimum or the best practice that should be implemented.
And I think just touching on from that, we had a few additional questions just around, you know, cloud providers. If you've previously hosted on-premise and now you've moved to the cloud, and obviously now your information no longer resides within your country, it's now residing somewhere else, you know, do you need to notify data subjects? Now, do you need to send them a personal message to say your data's moved? That's, you know, we don't need to go to that extent. But in your notices, you need to say that information may be crossing the South African borders or the MAU borders or the European borders, and to which countries they may be going to. So you need to have those lists of countries where you could potentially be sending it to. And you as the owner of that data really need to make sure that you actually understand, you know, if I'm using a cloud provider, where is that information going to be residing? Because a lot of the times we've gone in and we said, okay, fine, do you understand who your third parties are? Yes, we've got these cloud providers. Okay, where's the information residing? And a lot of the time it's like a bit of a stumbling question to be like, I'm not really so sure. Oh, I need to find out. So, you know, it's about you firstly understanding and making sure, like, you know, do you understand what those in-country privacy legislations or regulations look like? Do they actually have anything? What do they need to comply with? Is it more stringent or less stringent than where you reside? And I think it's really just understanding that and then putting that notification through your external website notices, put it out there to say, okay, fine, we share information with third parties and it goes to these jurisdictions as well, so that you're giving that transparency to say you understand, as well as, hey, I'm letting you know that this is where it could reside. And I think where the world is moving with cloud, it's more and more important for us to start really understanding that the residing of information and just understanding the jurisdiction. Roelien also touched on a bit of contracts and SLAs, and another one that, you know, is a big one. And I think the reason why it is so big is because the number of breaches that we've seen over the last few years, there's a portion of it is due to third parties, and it's moving more and more, you know, due to third parties. So, you know, often we use these third parties, we contract with them, and we get into a point where we now need to either update certain clauses from a privacy perspective, or we may be going through new negotiations, etc. At a point in time, you may have a third party that says, listen, I don't want to sign. I don't want to sign this contract. I don't agree with the terms. I don't agree with what you're saying is my responsibility. I can't do X, Y, Z. At that point in time, what do? Okay. You don't want to get to a position where you just sign the contract and then you move on, and a year down the line, you've got a breach with this third party, because what recourse do you have? Because they actually didn't sign anything. You know, that is at the point where you say, okay, guys, you know, you either need to sign or we're not going to go into services with you, because, you know, it is, you know, it's your information. And obviously you've got to look at the nature of services that they provide. There's a lot that goes into it. But if someone is providing you services where they are dealing with personal information, they really acting on your behalf, or they really doing key processing activities on personal information, and you're not entering into an agreement with them, you're putting yourself at risk. So really, you know, that's where you either say, okay, fine, I have to look for an alternative provider, or you make them sign the agreement. Obviously, again, just related to the processing and what activities are actually involved there. Any key questions coming through on our live Q&A, or are there some other ones that we can cover through from some people that posted beforehand?
Yes. So everyone attending, I am typing a few answers, and I know Candice will as well, to some of the shorter questions. And then maybe let's pick up, okay, here we go. With the whole outcry of what's happening with WhatsApp, do we have to leave or delete the account? If not, deregister to other applications? This is an interesting one, and I think all of us have an individual opinion about this. Myself, as much as I value my privacy, I actually opted to keep using WhatsApp. And the reason being is that I understand that they will be sharing metadata, so device data, frequency of use of the app, my number and email and login, well, not login details, but email or account related information with the likes of Facebook, which is their owning entity. And really the purpose of that is to create valuable data about each of us as users so that they can create targeted marketing on their platforms and even sell those profiles to big corporations or bigger corporations. The rationale behind my choice to keep using it, and please, disclaimer, the views and opinions of myself and Candice are not the views and opinions of Mobius Consulting. So I really just thought, okay, I actually don't have a Facebook account. So, it really doesn't matter to me all that much. The other thing is the US government doesn't really care about my messages in any way, and they are encrypted. Facebook won't have access to your messages. They remain encrypted. Then the other thing was, I don't really feel like I want to haul all of my contacts onto a new platform, which I haven't really used and I'm not familiar with, and make everyone use that platform. And then lastly, yes, we can use other platforms, but when does the day come that they have to sign big corporate agreements to sell data to big data companies and the likes of Facebook? So I think it's really, in my mind, a matter of checking my personal privacy settings on my phone. I immediately went and I checked, I enabled two-factor authentication on WhatsApp. I made sure that only my contacts are allowed to see certain information. So it's really just to control my own personal kind of data or personal usage on the platform. I know there's a lot of divided opinions around this, but I think, whether or not you choose to leave the platform, I think there are risks and maybe opportunities in using any of the available platforms out there.
Cool. And just as we move through, and I know we almost reaching our time. Some of the questions that haven't been answered, we will make sure we get through everything, and we'll send through responses for some of the questions that we may not have gotten to. But just as people are maturing on their privacy journeys, a lot of people are going to get to that control monitoring or that audit phase. And there's a lot of questions around, if I'm an internal auditor, what do I need to be skilled up in to actually be able to go and do an audit from a privacy perspective? Now, this does depend. And it depends on the size of your organization. So obviously, if you are a large organization, you're highly regulated, and you've got a full privacy team or full privacy office which looks after the organization, then you're going to make sure that your team is skilled up to be able to go and effectively do an audit. So you'd look at your IAPP, which Roelien mentioned in the beginning. They've got a few key international certifications. So you can a SIP-T, a SIP-M, a SIP-E, and it's all around certified privacy professionals, or either within technology space from a management perspective, just getting involved and understanding the European side of things. And then ISACA's also got certifications around from a privacy perspective. And what that helps you gear up to is it puts you in different scenarios. It takes you through different privacy principles, and it really gets you to that understanding. Whereas if you are a smaller organization, the first starting point is having your auditing backgrounds and your auditing skills, and then really understanding and attending the webinars and looking through the free sources that are available out there, which really will guide you in terms of, okay, what are data subject rights? What needs to happen when I'm dealing with consent? How do I manage and how do I navigate that landscape? Looking at some of the free assessments that are out there to say, okay, fine, what are the key things that I need to be checking? We love like the NIMITY framework. Look at the NIMITY framework, and really just it will guide you in terms of, okay, this is what I need to benchmark against, and it really just gives you that guide. Because GDPR has been out there for a lot longer. There's a lot of test cases, there are a lot of things that you can rely on that can guide you. We often like to look towards that for guidance, and a lot of the, our legislation, the Mauritius legislation, that is all aligned to GDPR. So if you're looking for guidance, test cases, that's always a good source to go to and to look at. The other audit question is, do I need to get my external auditors in? Do they need to do privacy audits? Again, dependent on the size. A Mobius Consulting wouldn't get an external auditor to come in and audit us unless somebody, a client of ours, required it and they needed it requested, where they wanted an external audit stamp to say, you know what, this is all in order. Whereas we would rely on other sources and other forms to say, okay, fine, this is what we've done from a compliance perspective. If it was required, that is where you can say, you need to pass it on to the person requesting it, etc. So those are just some of the, when we move into the audit journey, as we move closer and as we get further in our compliance journeys when it comes to privacy, it's things to consider from a privacy perspective.
All right. I think there's one more question. Obviously, the guys that have to drop off, please feel free. But what advice would you give to those within the facilities management space who deal with a lot of suppliers who request very confidential company documents, especially when signing onto a new contract? It's also a fair share of exchanging banking details, etc. So I think it's important maybe just to make the South African distinction here that company-related information is also seen as personal information. However, in the context of onboarding vendors or registering vendors, or you even as a supplier registering with potential clients, there's general vendor documentation and information that is available and should be made available, including directors' information, SIPC, VAT, banking details, etc., to be able to actually conduct business. Now, that's a reasonable reason to request or share that information. However, the receiving party should still have mechanisms in place to protect that information once they do have it. So I think there's different reasons for needing very sensitive information or for banking details, etc. But when you do have it in your possession, do make sure that you apply the normal controls that you would apply to any individual's information to keep it protected. Because once you have it, it's up to you how you secure it, and it's your responsibility to protect it.
Yeah, I think, Roelien, as we get closer to our end, I think there was one key one that stood out for me as well in terms of some of the questions that we got beforehand. And we all speak about GDPR because it was big, and it made everybody change. And I think it changed the landscape for everybody around the world, because everybody was processing EU citizen information, and privacy policies were updating, and it made us take it seriously. What's going to make South Africa and MAU and our other countries that are just stepping into this game, what makes them what is going to make our countries take privacy seriously? And for us, it's a few things that could happen, and we hope that it doesn't happen, that it doesn't get to that, and people really just become more privacy focused and centric around it. But one major thing could happen is that an EU authority comes and fines one of our local entities, because that will make major news, and everybody will be like, okay, I now need to take, I really do need to take this seriously. The others is our actual own regulators or your data protection authorities within your countries actually fining you, and really fining you big amounts. And they've got their eyes on who are the big people that may not be compliant already. So really taking something that's been a complaint and going with it and fining that entity, that will make sort of the teeth that everybody talks about a bit more real, and really start getting people to say, okay, what, we are taking this seriously. So as soon as we start seeing that movement, and I think we are going to, that's when I think, it's going to make the same noise that GDPR did. And I think we've seen the movement from both an MAU as well as a South African perspective in the last year. We've seen the scrambling of companies. So I think it is definitely moving in that direction. It's good to see. I'm hoping that it doesn't have to take a negative event for everybody to join, the curve that we're going up.
Okay. And then just another interesting question that came through for university or loan providers in SA. For unsuccessful applicants, how long do we need to keep the information? Can we use it for research and statistical purposes? So in many instances, there's not a specific legislation that prescribes for certain sets of data how long it should be kept. And I think this is just one of those, as well as a question we normally get is unsuccessful candidate CVs or related information. So if that's the case in your instance, determine how long it's actually going to make sense to keep that information in your business. I think this question refers to maybe keeping it for a year. And then, after that period, de-identify it. Get rid of any information that could uniquely identify a Candace or a Roelien, and then you are allowed to use it for your statistical and your research purposes. As long as we are practical in what we're collecting, how long we're keeping it, and if we want to use it for longer, implement the required controls to take away any personally identifiable information. That can really work as a practical example. As something else like employee records as an example, if an employee leaves your organization, the norm is to keep the information for about 4 years based on the basic conditions of Employment Act. However, if that employee was injured on duty and a health and safety claim was made during their employ at your company, you're actually supposed to keep that information for about 40 years. So really, again, I think the crux of our message is privacy and privacy compliance isn't always a black and white answer. It's really to consider it in the context of your organization, your industry, and the applicable legislation that applies to you.
Cool. So I know we've run past our 30-minute mark. I know there's some very key questions. So what we're going to try and do is answer some of them on our chat function. We also are going to send out any of the questions that we did answer today. So if you want to share it within your internal organization, you'll be able to. And I think just from a summarized perspective, some of those, do's and don'ts or key things to look out from a privacy perspective. So we are putting a privacy checklist out over the next I think few days. We put a lot out during this month, just being privacy month for us. So you can catch some of our things, to our tricks and trades around privacy. But if we're looking at, key things that really stand out from a do perspective is really, have somebody that's, got overall accountability within the organization for privacy, and make sure that person is really supported by people throughout the organization. Don't try and take on the journey alone. Because it's not easy. Even when you have smaller organizations, you still have to have a bit of a task team to really just help you out. Make sure that you have your internal and your external privacy policy, because your staff need to know how to handle information, and then your transparency needs to be out there from a website perspective, and then that links to your consent. Make sure all your data subject facing channels, anything where a data subject is going to be giving you information or is going to be reading, make sure that privacy is embedded. Your notices, your consent, and please, I know we got a question around it, but don't deny services if a person does not consent to marketing. They have to obviously accept your terms and conditions, which are different, but marketing, you cannot have a checkbox that they must receive your newsletter, and if they don't, then they can't sign up for your services. So, just be careful around that. I touched on a little bit, just understanding cross-border, know where your information is going, so that you can, again, inform your data subjects, let them know, just understand it. And then for me, third parties is always a big one. It's a key one. So understand them, understand what risk they pose, understand how much information they are actually processing of your data subjects, so that, you know, if anything had to go wrong, you've already got the right security safeguards in there, you've already got the right contracts. And for your high risk guys, you're doing due diligence, so you really are. And then really just make sure information security is there to support all the activities that you need their support in. They often are already implementing so many of the latest and greatest technologies, but make sure that you guys align, make sure that you have the privacy by design, you're doing those impact assessments before big implementation. So for me, if I had to say the big do's, those are the big do's, and the positives from a privacy perspective. I think you can flip them all and you can get the don'ts. So I think, you know, always act in the best way. And our thing is not about taking the stick approach or taking the any of the regulations or legislations and be like, okay, XYZ, implement this. It's about, guys, I need to do business. How do I make sure I do it in the right way from a privacy perspective?
Okay, great. Thank you, Candace. All right, so just to end off, I know we've been really speaking about privacy and you know, not really around our privacy approach and everything like that, but just to remind everyone that Mobius Consulting really does, you know, offer really practical solutions across multiple service lines, and we've got a question around that, and that includes cybersecurity, information security, third-party risk management, which is also quite topical when it comes to privacy and how you manage your contractors and some of the elements to consider there. Technology consulting, and then management or technology assurance as well. All right, so we really pride ourselves in the realm of information risk management and how we assist our clients in realizing and implementing, you know, controls to not only make them compliant, but to protect what's important to their business. All right. So I think with that, if there are no other further questions or comments, I'd really like to say thank you for everyone that has joined. I do hope this was helpful. Please leave a comment, go like us on LinkedIn. If you have a complaint, just don't direct it directly to me and Candace. And we hope to do this in future if you found this valuable. I think, you know, just kind of addressing questions as they come through is a really nice and interactive way of engaging with you guys as a community. So thank you from our side, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day ahead.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.